Thank you for standing by, and welcome to the LBT Innovations Quarterly Investor Call. All participants are in a listen-only mode. There will be a presentation followed by a question and answer session. If you wish to ask a question, you will need to press the star key followed by the number 1 on your telephone keypad. I would now like to hand the conference over to Mr. Brent Barnes, CEO and Managing Director of LBT Innovations. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Cameron, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining the call this morning. My name is Brent Barnes, and I'm pleased to welcome everyone to what is our first quarterly investor call, where I really have the opportunity to talk through some of the quarterly updates that were released as part of our 4C, but as well as offer an opportunity for people to ask any questions. We do have a relatively large shareholder base, close to 2,000 shareholders, and I would like to acknowledge the feedback that we've received over recent months. Shareholder feedback is certainly something that the company takes seriously and would like to acknowledge the feedback, and we are pleased to engage with you. As we grow the company, we believe it's helpful to use investor calls like the one today to provide a platform and an opportunity for shareholders to hear from the company directly, and also provide an opportunity to have your questions asked and for us to answer those in an open forum. For those who can't attend the call today and future calls, we'll also make these calls as a recorded listing on our website. I have also with me our Chief Financial Officer, Ray Ridge, and I'll hand it over to you, Ray.
Thanks, Brent, and good morning. One formality before we commence. I would like to remind those on this call that today's discussion will contain forward-looking statements which naturally involve risks and uncertainties. Those risks and uncertainties include those disclosed in our ASX lodgements, which we recommend that you review. There are reasonable grounds for any forward-looking statements we make today. However, due to their inherent uncertainties, you should not place undue reliance on them, and actual results may, of course, differ materially from those forward-looking statements. Now, the formalities out of the road, back over to you, Brent.
Great. Thanks, Ray. Look, I'll talk through some of the commentary. So obviously in our 4C that we did disclose to the market recently, we provided an update on the quarterly activities up till the end of March. And so I'll talk through some of those, as well as more recently, having come back from the ECMED meeting a couple of weeks ago. I think it's also probably a great time for me to give some colour and some flavour with respect to some of that feedback. But in terms of the quarter ending in March, it was really a successful quarter for the company, both from the perspective of a corporate finance side of things, but also from a commercialisation and engineering perspective. Starting with the corporate activity, I think the most significant activity related to this was the closing or securing what was really close to $12 million of funding that the company will receive over the next 2 years. It's really important because that sees the company fully funded until early 2020, which is when we expect to be cash flow positive. Starting with the private placement that we closed out, this was an oversubscribed placement of $7 million, and I would like to welcome new institutional and sophisticated investors to the register, and also thank existing shareholders who participated in the private placement too. In addition to the $7 million raise as the private placement, we also raised an additional $500,000 that came in from our share purchase plan, and again want to acknowledge and thank those shareholders who took up the opportunity. Finally, we did secure a $4 million funding or a grant from the South Australian government. That funding was part of a business case that the company put forward to the South Australian government in 2017 at the end of the year, and want to validate the fact that the changing government does not affect this funding. One of the key strategies that the company have established is to move or transition from what historically has been very much a focus on outsourcing of engineering and development effort to really transitioning into building internal capability for the company. And that's what this business case that was proposed to the South Australian government really focused on. As the company has now really proven the core APAS or the artificial intelligence capability is proven through our clinical trial and through the development over recent years, we know we have work that needs to be done over subsequent years. So rather than pay external companies to move forward and do this work, we've taken a strategic view to build capability internally, which will allow us to control the process more effectively, to do it more in a cost-conscious way, and allow us to really leverage the platform technology. The three areas where we will grow the business from a people perspective are in the areas of artificial intelligence, science, and software engineering. And as part of the proposal that we put to the South Australian Government, it will see us increase or expand our team by 16 people over the next 2 years. And we've successfully already employed 5 people during the quarter in those areas. So it's been a busy quarter for us, really executing on that internal people development capability as well. Underpinning some of the corporate activity that was achieved, I did have the opportunity to attend the JP Morgan Biotech Showcase, which was in San Francisco in early January of this year. And I also spent a few days up in New York doing a roadshow with various stakeholders there. It was a great opportunity for me to meet with various institutional investors and also potential industry partners to promote the APAS story, and was the first time the company's done a roadshow in the US. Kind of moving gears to the commercialization activities. Firstly, here in Australia, it was great to have a sales executive who we appointed, and they are Sydney-based. That was deliberate because most of the labs are on the East Coast, and so we wanted to have a sales presence which was closer to our customers. Having feet on the street and having people in and out of these laboratories in a face-to-face context, meeting lab directors and raising awareness is really important, and builds on what we started at the end of last year with some marketing collateral and some marketing messaging that we focused on delivering to various labs here in Australia. I also want to talk a bit about the sales process, just to provide some clarity about what that looks like and what the team are focused on doing. It is a new technology that exists. The current gold standard of plate reading is manual, and that's what happens everywhere throughout the world today, including here in Australia. And so the first activity or task that we have is to raise awareness that there is an alternative to a manual plate read, which is our automated plate assessment system, or APAS Independence. And it's ready. And to that extent, this is what we do from a marketing perspective, but also from a sales perspective, going into labs, explaining how the technology works. Once the lab understands there's technology that exists, they will definitely want to trial or to validate the instrument and its use within their own clinical laboratory prior to making a buying decision. And the things that they're looking for as part of that trial is obviously the clinical results, so ensuring that, in fact, the APAS technology is working as we declare it works. They'll look at the workflow implications for their lab, so how difficult or how easy is it, what other efficiencies might they generate with the introduction of the instrument into the laboratory. And then finally, is it actually going to deliver efficiencies within their own clinical laboratory context? Once those things are done, well, then they need to make a buying decision. And some of the things around whether or not that is a short-term or a long-term thing obviously relate to budget and looking at budget cycles and timing and the like. So the sales process is one that requires a number of steps and is one that we are across and familiar with. And we've started that process, as I said, at the very end of last year through some marketing initiatives. We've now got feet on the street here in Australia, and making good progress with respect to executing that sales funnel and that pipeline. The company had previously given guidance that a first sale or a commitment to buy would occur during the first half of this calendar year, and that's really only 7 weeks away, so not long to go. Wanted to confirm or give guidance on this call that we do expect a purchase order roughly within that time frame. But I think more importantly, whether it's in 7 weeks, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, or 10 weeks, which is kind of the guidance that we're setting, it's looking at the overall year and what would one expect from an overall sales volume perspective in the 2018 calendar year. And perhaps to best answer that, there was an analyst report that was released by PAC Partners, and that was made available on our website at the end of last year. And that report indicated that 5 instruments would be sold in the 2018 calendar year. And from a company perspective, I want to confirm that broadly that's in line with our expectations. Moving on to the engineering side of the business, this is something we don't often talk about, but is equally important, and we've made some really good progress in this area. I did announce that we've shipped a production-ready instrument to Wisplinghoff, and this essentially outlines that we've made progress on the establishment of our manufacturing site, and we have the ability to build instruments, which is really positive. And following feedback from St Vincent's, and also with conducting our own internal verification work, we've also made some updates to the software, really around focusing on areas to improve usability but also stability of the instrument. And this is something we expect to occur on an ongoing basis. It is a first-generation instrument, and as part of our sustaining engineering plan and schedule of activities going forward, and as we receive feedback from customers, this is something that we expect will continue going forward. Moving on to more recent announcements over the last few weeks, we exhibited at the largest microbiology conference of the year. This is ECMED, or the European Congress of Clinical Microbiology and Infectious Diseases. And this is held in Madrid a couple of weeks ago. About 13,000 participants attended the conference. Our joint venture company, Clever Culture Systems, had a display booth. We had a working instrument, obviously, on the stand, and we had a number of clinical and technical and salespeople attending and exhibiting at that booth. Probably of note was Lisa Brenton from St Vincent's Hospital, who submitted and had her paper accepted, which was really documenting or presenting the results of the formal validation that was completed in November of 2017. The presentation was titled Image Interpretation of Urine Cultures Using the APAS Independence, Artificial Intelligence in the Routine Clinical Laboratory. And it was really fantastic to have Lisa advocate about the technology, talk about her experience using the instrument and her team's experience using the instrument during the evaluation, all of which was very positive. Lisa presented those results. Lisa was also available on our booth or on our stand, and it was fantastic to be able to have her talk with prospective lab directors and interested parties to explain her experience. I think one of the insights that I had when I compared this year versus 12 months ago at the same ECMED conference that we had in Vienna is the conversation really shifted. 12 months ago, the first question everyone asked was, what lab has it been in? And of course, at that time, it was the first instrument we'd actually built. It was a working instrument, but it was the first instrument we'd built. And we could only say, well, this is the first. Rolling forward 12 months later, we not only have not only do we have our first installation completed at St Vincent's, we also have publication that's been released by Lisa and by St Vincent's, and we have Lisa on the stand able to talk through that. I think the other really important message we're able to deliver after saying that, especially as it relates as important from a European context, is we're able to say that we've also shipped a production instrument to Germany. So this is the first time moving out of Australia into Europe. And that shipment happened, and subsequently the commissioning and installation has been successful. And that's in a lab called Labor Dr. Wisplinghoff in Cologne, which is in Germany. I mentioned before, this is a production-ready instrument that has been installed. Not only has it been installed, but it was also an opportunity to train the staff within the lab from both an engineering and a clinical perspective. Previously, I had announced an unnamed partner that we've been working with in Europe. They continue to be unnamed, but in terms of giving some update there, in addition to Labor Dr. Wisplinghoff being trained, it was also an opportunity to train this on-the-ground partner of ours, again, both with an engineering and clinical context. Australia is a long way from Germany, and so what we have got and what's really important is we have a local partner who's able to support that installation at a very practical level. Just to give some comparison in terms of the size, St Vincent's Hospital process around 350 or 400 plates a day. Labor Dr. Wisplinghoff process 5,000 plates a day. So it's a really great example of having a different size laboratories using the instrument, and certainly the feedback and the workflow implications and creating these centre of excellence reference sites both here in Australia and also in Europe, importantly, a much bigger market, is a fantastic milestone and one that really sets us up for future growth outside of Australia. So overall, we've been very active with respect to these commercialisation activities in the quarter. We've also built on and really what underpins our future success by raising enough money to ensure that we can deliver on our set of activities over the next 2 years. I want to turn it over now to Ray to take us through some of the financial results for the quarter.
Thanks, Brent. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to briefly review the cash flows reported in our most recent Appendix 4C lodged with the ASX. All numbers are in Australian dollars and are not audited. So for the quarter ended 31st of March, the company's net cash outflow from operating and investing activities was 2.1 million. And this is expected to reduce marginally to 1.9 million in the coming quarter. Also, the company successfully raised $7 million through a private placement at 15 cents a share, of which tranche 1 of 3.8 million was received and reflected in the quarter's cash flows. This brings the total net cash flow for the quarter to 1.4 million after capital raise costs, and leaves a healthy cash balance for the 31st of March of 5.7 million. Then to add to that, following the end of the quarter, we received tranche 2 of the placement of 3.2 million following shareholder approval at the EGM on the 18th of April, and another $500,000 for the share purchase plan. Also, as Brent mentioned, the $4 million loan commitment from the South Australian Government has progressed to drafting of final agreements, and we expect this to be finalised shortly. $1 million of that $4 million is due to be received upon signing, with the following 2 tranches or drawdowns of $1.5 million by December 2018 and another $1.5 million by December 2019, subject to achieving milestones. And that's it for me, Brent. Back to you.
Great, thanks, Ray. So some really good financial results, I think, which underpin the progress of the company. Looking ahead and perhaps in some closing remarks, APAS clearly, and the commercialisation of APAS clearly remains a priority for the company as well as our joint venture company, Clever Culture Systems. Building on the evaluation of St Vincent's Hospital as a centre of excellence will be important. And as we move forward with the sales process here in Australia, we do expect other laboratories to visit St Vincent's Hospital to see how it functions within their lab. Kind of moving across back to Europe, we've now installed that instrument at Labor Dr. Wisplinghoff. We've got some work to move forward with respect to agreeing with a protocol. That's quite important because in order to measure success, you have to have some metrics and upfront agreed set of milestones or objective settings. And so establishing that protocol is really important. And we expect them to start within the quarter. We also have a couple of key meetings for the US. So we've kind of moved to Europe first, and ECMED is definitely the largest. The second largest meeting is the American Society of Microbiology meeting, which this year is in Atlanta. That's about 5 weeks' time. So it's very kind of typical approach is what we did with ECMED. It's a busy time leading up to that. We've already got our booth set up and the layout of that all organised, but a contingent of staff will go across and be at that booth and raise awareness in primarily the US context. At the end of July, there's an American Society for Clinical Chemistry meeting in Chicago. This is a bit of a broader meeting, so it's not as focused specifically on microbiology, but all of the microbiology players are there. So it's another opportunity again to participate in a very large conference. It's a bigger conference than the American Society of Microbiology meeting, and that'll be much more targeted at following up some of the discussions that we will have with potential distribution partners that we would have done at ASM. On the engineering side and people side, we'll continue to look at recruitment and building the internal team and solidifying that organisational capability. That's really important because we have work to do with respect to these future analysis modules. And we've developed the urine module. Next will be the MRSA, VRE, or we'll call it infection control. But there is a suite of additional analysis modules that we'll be working on. And that's quite important because it increases the clinical utility of our instrument on a global basis. So with that, I'd like to close. Thank everyone for their participation on the call, and Cameron, hand it over to you to moderate any questions.
Thank you very much. Just a quick reminder, if you do wish to register for a question, please press star then 1 on your telephone and wait for your name to be announced. Your first question comes from Paul Jens from PAC Partners. Please go ahead.
Can you hear us okay, Brent?
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Just 2 quick questions. One is just on the competitive tension you have, both here in Australia with selling the first APAS unit and on the distribution side in Europe, how you create competitive tension there, please.
Thanks, Paul. On the competitive tension front, here firstly in Australia, the competitive landscape for us is one where we're really competing against manual labour. The other part is there's that obvious early adoption piece, and we're selling into a scientific community which is often quite conservative in nature. We don't have a direct competitor, but we certainly have competitors that compete in automation, and these are large end-to-end instruments within microbiology. And to give you an idea of the cost of these instruments, the Royal Adelaide Hospital implemented an instrument called the Keystra system, and it's been publicly announced that the cost of that was just under 5 million Australian dollars. So we're obviously in a very different setting with respect to direct competition there. But if we're talking more about competitive tension amongst laboratories, look, I think from a government perspective, there's no real tension that exists, and everyone's quite collegiate. So we don't have issues whereby if St Vincent's are looking to perhaps procure an instrument versus another government hospital, a government hospital in Sydney or Queensland, that doesn't really exist. On the private side, perhaps it's a little bit more sensitive, but that's not a horrible thing. In the end, I think people understand that we're a manufacturer, we have an instrument that we're bringing to market, and naturally we're going to cover all people who might benefit, or all pathology labs, both private and public, who might be interested in the technology. On the distribution side, we've been working with this unnamed distributor for some time, and we've now done some training with them, which has been really good. The meeting that we had in Madrid, the ECMED meeting, allowed us to talk to a variety of other potential distributors. So there's more than one distributor that we are talking with, and clearly that does help us with respect to potential competitive tension. There are alternatives that we do have. Those things will be fleshed out, I think, over coming months, but a reasonably healthy position that we're in. And I think one of the key reasons why we haven't got a distribution agreement done already is because people want to see the instrument validated, they want to see it in labs, they want to receive the feedback prior to signing up or putting their name to it.
Good. And just second question was just you're approaching 2 years with the group, Brent, so maybe if you can give us a bit of a snapshot as to what you expected on going into the group and what's actually transpired, and I suppose give us an idea of the accelerated nature that has occurred and whether it's accelerated to your expectation.
Thanks, Paul. I think everyone wants things to move quicker than what they do, but these things do take time. We are looking to introduce a novel technology, which is a global first. From an expectations perspective, look, I've had really great support from the board. We had Bob Finder, who was our long-serving chairman of 10 years, really support me in the early stages coming into the company. And when Bob retired, it was great having Kate, who to take over as chair. And Kate's been a director of the company pretty well since inception. So having that continuum of understanding and that corporate knowledge has been really important. And as part of that board capability, if you like, one of the key things that the board and I did look at, well, what were some of the capabilities that we thought the board required to really meet the milestones and the outlook that we've set for the company over the next 3 to 5 years. And there were two key areas that we thought were important. The first was building capability within artificial intelligence and software engineering, if you like. And that's where Matt McElowitz, who's an Adelaide-based non-executive director, he fills that gap. And Matt's had a lot of experience in starting and exiting companies based in the US and here in Australia. And so he joined the board in September. And at the same time, Matt joined. The other component was really looking at the access to the corporate markets and financial markets. And also that startup kind of mentality with respect to being successfully moving businesses through the maturity, and that's where Glenn Hafer has been really great, and he came into the board again at the same time as Matt. So we've had a refresh or a bit of a revitalization, if you like, to fill out some of the opportunities of that we saw at a board level, which I think set us on a really good path for the coming 3 to 5 years.
Thanks, Brent.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Once again, if you wish to ask a question, please press star then one on your phone and wait for your name to be announced. Your next question comes from David Blake from BioShares. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Brent and Ray. I've got just a question to begin with about the modules you're developing. Are you able to perhaps go into that in a bit more detail and describe to us the sequence in terms of what will come out first and then what will come out second, and what's your work sheet mean in terms of what you have to accomplish with those modules?
Sure. Thanks for the question, David. The analysis modules are really the heart of the instrument, if you like. And when we did our 10,000 patient clinical trial in 2015, and that really formed the basis of getting the de novo FDA clearance. That was a urine module, meaning the specimen type is urine, and the analysis module is able to accurately read and assess urine samples on agar plates. There are more than just urine samples that go through this culture plate workflow, and what we have the opportunity to do is to expand the number of samples that our APAS instrument can process. So urines are done. That was the basis of the FDA submission. In terms of, well, what are the first, second, and third modules that were released, the next is what's called MRSA. And MRSA is a routine surface swab, if you like, which looks to pick up staph. So that's the second. The third is called VRE. Essentially, the second, third, and fourth are really summarized by calling it infection control. And these are the routine type of swab work that occurs. If you look at volume, and why did we start with urines? Well, in the Western cultures, probably around 60%, anywhere from 50 to 60% of all specimens going through a labs are urines. Adding on MRSA, you're then kind of building it up to 60 to 70%. And so what we're able to do, if we look at the modules of urine and MRSA or infection control together, we're really aiming to ensure that the instrument can process between that 60 to 70% of samples going through the lab. And that's really important because then it means that from a lab perspective, that covers the majority of specimens going through their lab. and obviously then allows them to draw on the efficiencies. By contrast, and why it's relevant and in terms of the global context, if we look at China, number one specimen is sputum, and that's due to the respiratory issues that exist in China. And so it's an example whereby if we were to sell our instrument or look to market our instrument in China today, well, it wouldn't be as appealing because urines and MRSA aren't a high throughput module for them. And so we would need to develop that sputum module in order for it to have a higher degree of clinical utility. And that kind of ties a little bit back into building this internal capability in the areas of science, software engineering, and artificial intelligence. Because what it allows us to do is to get better and quicker at building these modules, and it also allows us to extend into other areas. While we're definitely focused on clinical microbiology, we've done some initial work on looking to extend that into other disciplines such as agriculture. And if you take water sampling, water samples go through this same culture plate workflow as well. So we have an opportunity to train our algorithm to look at water, and dairy is another one. And so there are future modules or future extensions of what we've already developed, which allow us to extend the applications of use. And of course, this sits on the platform or the hardware that we've already built. And so really this future investment in these analysis modules allow us to expand the market size and market opportunity for the instrument that we've developed.
Great. I just had one other one. Looking ahead to 2019, when you go back to ECMID and ASM, can you hypothesize about what your position will be in terms of traction and reach and marketing in say 12 months' time?
Yeah, I think the big difference will be having a portfolio of publications. And today we had one publication that was by St. Vincent's Hospital. And I mentioned that they're on the smaller side of the labs. They're definitely a centre of excellence and very well renowned and have a fantastic reputation here in Australia. But all labs are different, right? Different sizes. Some do 300, some do 400, some do 1,000, some do 5,000, like the Wisplinghof lab in Germany. And so I think it's all about building up a portfolio of reference sites and having them publish their results. And certainly extending the geographical reach. Today we're in Australia. We've only just recently, a couple of weeks ago, installed an instrument in Germany. But I think building on the foundation of expanding our reach into these key geographies will be where the focus will be in 12 months' time, and having more validation of increased reference laboratories.
Thanks for that.
Thanks, David.
Thank you. There are no further questions at this time, so I will hand it back to Mr. Barnes for closing remarks.
Thanks, Cameron. I would like to encourage, if there are any retail shareholders on the line, please feel free, happy to cover any questions, but obviously also thank both David and Paul from an institutional perspective. But just thought I'd pause just for one moment to see if there were any final questions.
Just a reminder as well, if you do wish to register, you can do so by pressing star then 1 on your phone and waiting for your name to be announced. No questions at this time.
Okay. Look, thanks, Cameron, and thanks everyone for joining the call. I hope the verbal update has been one that's provided a little bit more colour than the text that goes out on these 4C announcements. As I said at the start, we'll endeavour to do these calls on a quarterly basis and encourage those opportunities as a platform to ask any questions that people may have. Thanks very much for your time, and look forward to talking with people during the next call or in between that as it may be required. Thank you.